Along with my fellow Elders for Climate Justice colleagues, Judd Laurie, Lance Paglia, Steve Simmer, and Stu Kennedy, we're delighted this morning to be meeting with a young climate leader, Nakhie Faynshteyn. And we're particularly excited about this because we have made a conscious priority choice in the work we're doing, as we've been working for almost 2 years now, to particularly focus on supporting young climate folks who are out there and are going to be clearly more affected by the future of the problems with what's happening to our climate. And so we're very happy to be meeting with Nakhie this morning. Nakhie is a co-lead of the Sunrise Movement Boston Hub Media Team and a part of the Sunrise National Hub Support Team. He has his undergraduate and graduate academic studies are focused on environmental anthropology and environmental justice and governance. Over the past 5 years, he's participated in a number of environmental actions, including stopping the Spectra Northeast Access Pipeline. So let me start off, Nakhie, by asking you to describe a brief summary about the Sunrise Movement, who I think a lot of people nationally have heard more and more about related to the Green New Deal. But could you give us an overview of how Sunrise came to be, how it's grown, what it is, where does it have presence, membership, nodes, that kind of thing?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you all again for having me, and I'm so glad to have this opportunity to talk more about our movement. So the Sunrise Movement is a youth-led national climate justice movement that is fighting to end climate change and create millions of jobs in the process. So our story starts about 2 years ago when a group of 10 young people who were involved with fossil fuel divestment and anti-extraction work on their college campuses across the country got together because they wanted to create more impactful change and really shift the discussion around climate change after Trump was elected. So they spent a year planning and constructing the story, structure, principles, and culture of our movement, which then they debuted at the People's Climate March in April of 2017. So right now, we have over 100 hubs. Our hubs are what we call our chapters across the country, and thousands of young people across the country spread across those hubs, actively planning actions, hosting meetings, creating trainings, and building really vibrant communities of climate justice activists.
I think that will turn it over to you, Judd.
Thank you, Robert. Good morning, Nakhie. Thank you for joining us. And first, on a personal level, I would just like to really thank you and your colleagues at Sunrise for the ray of sunshine, the glimmer of hope in this very troubling climate change situation we find ourselves in. So thank you. So let me ask you to kind of briefly describe, if you would, what are some of the key strategies, projects, priorities of Sunrise at this time going forward? And what are some of your key successes so far?
Yeah, so I would highly suggest folks go to our website, sunrisemovement.org. And in the About section, we have a more detailed overview of our movement strategy and philosophy, as well as momentumcommunity.org to find more information about kind of our movement's theory of change. To kind of give very quickly, our theory of change is based around this social movement think tank called Momentum, which has also helped foster other young youth-led movements like If Not Now, Cosecha, and Cosecha. And so we all kind of share a basic foundation in this sort of idea of a decentralized youth-led movement, but focusing on various different issues. But to summarize, like I said, Sunrise is a youth-led movement, meaning we emphasize that people under 35 are the leaders of the work that we do, and those over that age play supportive roles and act as allies. We are a decentralized movement, meaning we do not have one person or a core team of people making the decisions, and like the day-to-day decisions and what's happening on the ground. pretty much we hold ourselves accountable to a set of 11 principles. And as long as those principles are upheld, and you can see those principles on the website, and as long as those principles are upheld, people can act in the name of Sunrise in the way they think is needed. We are also a nonviolent movement, so we do partake in acts of civil disobedience, but do not take any violent action in any way. And also, we as a movement are focused around storytelling. We believe that the more we can bring in our own personal experiences, our own personal narratives into the work we do, and especially into the work and the issue of climate change, the more people can actually really connect and understand the severity of the issue. And to touch on a few points of kind of what our current priorities and projects are, I think mainly, as I think all of you know, and most people across the country know, the Green New Deal is pretty much our biggest priority, and pushing for a Green New Deal, meaning, and when I say a Green New Deal, I mean a complete overhaul of our society's industries, the energy infrastructure, public transportation, pretty much completely remaking how our systems function in the next 10 years so that we can make sure that emission levels are at a low enough point that we do not go over the 2 degrees centigrade threshold. And in addition to all those things, doing it in a way that is inclusive of frontline communities, people who are most vulnerable, who have been and are going to be most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So embedded in all that work around changing these systems is also the idea that it's all done in an equitable and just manner.
Sounds very challenging and ambitious. What do you regard as some of your key successes so far?
Yeah, so I would say, so like I've said, the movement has only been around for 2 years. And in that span of time, we've already caused ripples in our country's politics. And so one of the major accomplishments we've had is that we have gotten over 1,300 politicians, from city councilors to congressional representatives, to take the no fossil fuel money pledge and stop the corrupting influence of fossil fuels on our politics. And some of those people include people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who have promised that they will refuse to take any more any money from fossil fuel CEOs, lobbying groups, frontline groups, anyone who is giving them money that is over $200. Anyone who's giving them from those places over $200, because we also understand that, you know, there might be people who work in those industries that are hoping for a better future and want a better future and do donate to these politicians. So we capped it at 200 so that to make sure that people in these industries can still donate. In May of last year, we launched a fellowship program called Sunrise Semester to engage more youth in the elections. And so from June to November, 70 young people lived together in 7 movement houses spread across 5 swing states that were crucial in these past midterm elections. And so over the course of those 6 months, these climate activists contacted over 250,000 voters, coordinated a multitude of actions, and helped build up new hubs across the country. And with all this people power, we were able to elect 19 out of the 30 candidates that we endorsed as a movement, which included progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar. Also, of course, over the course of the last 4 or 5 months since last November, we just kept going, and we put the Green New Deal on the national agenda, and that was thanks to thousands of young people who joined us in DC over the course of a few huge actions that we did, as well as thousands of people across the country who did local actions and helped amplify our message through social media. We helped to create the resolution that is now most prominently being talked about, that was put out this past February by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ed Markey, which now has 89 House representatives and 11 senators as co-sponsors.
you. All sounds great, terrific. Let me turn it over to the next man.
So Nakhie, I really appreciate you sitting for this interview, and it's exciting to hear about the work you're doing. My question is, I did some research a while ago and looked at the rate at which carbon emissions have entered the atmosphere. And I noticed that the lion's share of carbon emissions have been emitted during my lifetime, which means that these old guys sitting before you have been not necessarily perpetrators in the sense that none of us are multi-billionaires that are in the fossil fuel industry, but we've been recipients of this culture where we've gotten a lot of benefits with SUVs and air conditioners and this kind of thing. And I'm just curious what your reaction is to sitting with a bunch of older people who've been bystanders, kind of looking the other way, getting interested in other issues, recipients of the benefits and this kind of thing. And we've known for 40 years about the dangers of climate change, and nobody has done a whole lot about it. There's not a significant difference. Nakhie Faynshteyn is basically saying we can't afford it. And I'd just be curious about your reaction to the older generation and what we've done.
Yeah, I think myself and many other young people included have been really upset and frustrated at the people who over the last 40 years have very much disrespected and willfully polluted our planet through, like you mentioned, destructive consumption and the extraction of fossil fuels. But I do want to emphasize that our issue isn't, as young people, isn't with people of our previous generation. I don't think we're not trying to create this it's not. I don't think it's useful for us to really create a tension between older and younger generations, because in a way that's kind of what people in power probably want us to do, is just to fight amongst ourselves instead of fight them. So to say that really it isn't just the older people who are at fault or that they played a big role. It is the people who have been in power this whole time, the politicians, and especially those who have been running and managing these industries. And as you said, we've known this for these people in these industries, like, for example, Exxon has kind of been the main one in the limelight, have known since at least 1968 that the industry would have had an impact on the planet, and instead chose to ignore the research that showed that, and for the sake of profit. I would also emphasize that we know that folks have been actively fighting for the planet for many, many years, particularly people of indigenous heritage, have been stewards of this planet, have been fighting and staying with this understanding that this planet we are part of this planet and not just users of it. And I will also say that I and most young people wish more was done by I think kind of where the frustration lies in many ways is that we wish more was done by the generations of environmental activists whose shoulders we do stand on now, and who we wish could have done more in the past. But I think the hopeful thing to think about, and to look at it in a more optimistic way, is that we can now work together in this moment and bring our vast array of knowledge together to continue the fight and do what needs to be done so that we as young people can continue to spearhead the effort forward.
Okay, this is Lance Polia in Vermont. You mentioned several issues before that Sunrise was involved in, but there's one particular issue that really grabs the imagination and attention of young people that we can help with. What's the one that really grabs people?
Well, I can't say that there is just one environmental or climate related issue that young folks all think about or share in common. I think what has drawn so many of us to this issue is one, the urgency of the conditions we are in, and that if we don't do enough, that pretty much means that people like myself and many other young people won't really be able to have a future. And two, that we see climate change happening, kind of why we're so drawn to climate change as a whole is that we see it happening in our own communities in many ways, through flooding, through forest fires, through, various large disasters, and even through things that aren't as visible, such as lead in pipelines, or or other kind of structural environmental justice issues that aren't as you can't see as easily. Which that relates to a third point that about how we relate to why climate change is such a big part of my work and so many young people's, is that the many intersecting threads of the causes of climate change, and how climate change really shows how so many different systems of exploitation and oppression are tied together. So even though climate change may be a more recent issue of the last half century, but the way I and many people see it is a consequence. It is a symptom of the larger systems of oppression and exploitation that have existed in the world for centuries. Racism, colonialism, imperialism, sexism, these are all things that have continued to exist and still are perpetuated. And I think one of the what draws me to this work, and I think what draws a lot of people to this work, is that climate change and environmental injustice is one of the most visible ways to see how these systemic issues play out.
Thank you. So I think you mentioned three issues here. One is the urgency of the issue, obviously. Two is the locality that's happening close to home. And three, its interaction with other issues, environmental justice and other equitable issues. How can we engage young people around those issues? What can we do as elders to get their attention and work with them on those issues?
Well, I think sometimes it's just engaging with young people in your own communities. I think it's great that you've asked me to come here and come and speak with you, but I think sometimes it's as simple as just talking to other young people and seeing, well, tell me what are the issues that you feel, like asking this same question to other young people, and interviewing them if they're willing, interviewing them and asking them their opinions and their perspectives. And in that way, I think you'll have a more clear understanding of ways that you can help and help push the fight against climate change.
Makes sense to me. And lastly, we're trying to develop a website. We have a website and we're trying to attract young people to it. And I notice your website's pretty attractive. What can we do to get more people attracted to our website, more young people attracted to our website?
I think it might even just be less the website and more, I think one of the distinct kind of barriers between folks who are older and younger is our younger folks' real ability to use social media as such a massive tool of organizing and communication. So I think it may not be exactly the website, and may just be engaging more on social media and pointing to specific things on the website, like pointing to interviews that you've done or specific other things that are featured there.
Good, we intend to do that. Thank you, Nakhie.
Yeah, I was going to ask the question that Lance just now asked. So let me just say, Nakhie, it warms my heart to see your spirit and enthusiasm and just your passion for this. And as one among many elders here, I want to say we are part of your army. I sent a message to my Senator Ed Markey, whom we're all really pleased has co-sponsored the Green New Deal, to tell him that same thing. We're part of the army. It's not just young people, but bless you for your enthusiasm and energy. Keep it up.
Okay, so maybe just a follow up to Lance's question, this last one. Clearly, as I've said, we as a group, and we are part of a large international men's organization called the Mankind Project, and we have access to thousands of men across the country and around the world, and we believe that this is a critical issue, and those of us who get older are actually the elder part of that group. So one of the sort of core competencies, if you will, that we have, that we believe is important for each other to kind of move ahead and live, the kind of lives that contribute to society. Part of one of our core values is being mindful of and stewards of the land, the planet, taken care of so that the next generations can benefit from it. This is a conscious, explicit target of ours. But one of our core competencies is we know that to move forward, very often, we need significant sort of group support and a place that one can authentically share one's feelings and discouragement when we're trying to fight what are pretty, significant odds against us. When you think about the fossil fuel industry and those multi-millions of dollars and the entrenched, folks out there. So it's easy. I think one of the things that happens to folks is they kind of throw in a towel after a while. They work at it, and then, but I guess my question is there a place that this core competency of ours, this sort of creating containers of emotional support, might be a benefit to young people, or do you do that yourselves in the Sunrise Movement? You don't need us elders to give you a hand with it.
Yeah, so I think kind of to expand on like what can elders do for Sunrise, and to answer your question, in Sunrise we've actually put together a resource guide on this called the #YoungAtHeart guidelines, which give defined suggestions for what our allies can do, and to highlight a few points that the guidelines suggest is provide resources that you can. Donations, food for events, spaces for meetings, all those things. We are, as I said earlier, we are a majority volunteer-led movement, and even though we are, because of our national attention, we are getting funding in some ways, but there's only so much funding that can really be spread across over 100 hubs and thousands of people. So any way that you can help with local hubs in those ways is very helpful and much appreciated. In addition to providing resources yourself, I think, like you said, you have this huge network of men across the country, and I'm sure each of you have your own personal networks of people that you know. And it's likely that because you've all been around longer than me, that you probably even know some more influential people, be it an editor in a local newspaper or maybe some connection to a politician. And getting in touch with those people and letting them know about what's happening and your own connection to us is always useful and helpful. And also I would say that something that often we don't talk about, but is a really important piece, is offering to listen to us. I think one of the biggest problems we face as young people, and we've seen time and time again within Sunrise itself, is that as young people we aren't always listened to. Sometimes we're dismissed and seen as naive and unintelligent. And so sometimes the most useful thing is to have an older person just listen to us, listen to our thinking, listen to what we have to say and our perspectives, and to validate it and know that we aren't, it's not just young people who are in this fight, that there are many, many, many people that support our work and want to keep things, make sure that things can keep moving in a sustainable way.
Thank you.
I came to the US when I was 1 with my family. My family moved to the US from Odessa, Ukraine in 1995, right after, pretty much a few years after the fall of the Soviet Union. And so in addition to kind of looking at climate change as an environmental issue, I also deeply believe in it as someone who is a practicing Jew, as an immigrant, that all these issues are connected. As someone, you know, whose family came here on this, and as many immigrants come here on this perception of an American dream, I really do see the Green New Deal and the hope that it's trying to push forward as an actual attainable American dream that isn't just something that's promised to us, that is actually something that can happen, and that will not just benefit us individually, but it can actually benefit the entire planet and the health of our world.
So thank you so much for being with us this morning.